All right, today is August 10th, 2021. It's 3:23 p.m. and we're here with Mr. Russ Cherry, and I'm Kylie Coleman, and Elizabeth Jew is going to be interviewing. So could you tell us when and where you were born?
I was born in New Jersey in 1948, and up near the Sandy Hook area, the northern part of the coast, and so I was pretty close to the beach, and we had a Coast Guard station not too far away that I used to see, and they used to visit us out in the water from time to time.
Oh, wow. So what branch of service were you in, rank and grade?
I eventually became a captain in the Coast Guard Reserve.
What was your time served?
Well, from active approximately 7 years, and reserve time about 21 years, so 28 years in total.
Oh, wow. And what conflicts and time periods?
Actually, I missed most of the biggest conflicts. I came in right at the very end of the Vietnam War, did not go to Vietnam, and stayed until I retired in 2000, which was just before 9/11. And I was involved as a reservist during the Gulf War, but most of my activity was with the Coast Guard activities on the East Coast.
All right, do you want to?
So where and when did you enlist, or were you commissioned, or were you drafted?
Good question. I actually joined. I was a reluctant enterer to any of the services. I went to Woodstock in 1969 during college, and I had always assumed that by the time by the time I graduated, Vietnam would be over, and it wasn't. And as a consequence, I graduated in 1970 from the University of Tennessee, and then went back to grad school for a year, trying to stretch it out as long as possible. But then I had to focus on what was next, and I was fortunate enough to be able to apply for officer candidate school, and with the Coast Guard, I went there in September of 1971.
So,
And I graduated from OCS in January of 1972.
That's cool. So what made you decide to join? Like, was there a major event that made you decide that you wanted to join the Coast Guard? Was it like a string of events?
Well, why I wanted to join primarily at that time was something called the draft. And people were being drafted. They'd pick your number, everybody had to take a number, and my draft number was 62. And as I said, I was a reluctant participant at the time. I was pretty immature. I didn't know what I wanted to do. For a time, I thought that it was not a military service, but that got me going. As far as the Coast Guard was concerned, I wanted to fly, and at that point, you needed to have 20/20 perfect uncorrected vision. Mine was a shade off. It's since improved.
Oh no.
Yeah, and so I wasn't eligible for the Air Force as a pilot, and nor the Navy or the Coast Guard. But once I found out I couldn't fly for the Air Force, I went over to the Navy. The Navy. I took what was called the OQT. I think it stood for Officer Qualification Test, and passed that. The Navy said, "We'd love to have you." This would have been about March of 1971, and they said, "But we're kind of backed up right now, and we're busy." and so they said, "What we'll do is we'll enlist you, and you can go to Navy Officer Candidate School in Newport in the following March, I believe." And I thought, well, I've already spent a year in grad school here. I kind of want to get on with my life. And the Navy recruiter was fine. I said, is there any way I can do something sooner? And they said, well, not with the Navy. But if you want, I've got a friend with the Coast Guard stationed at Governor's Island in New York. And he called him and he said they still have, for whatever reason, they had a couple of spaces left in the September OCS. I drove from Knoxville, Tennessee to Governor's Island, New York, and it was about 800 miles. And I took, I went there. They were able to use my Navy paperwork. I went to had an interview and met with a few people, and then got word a week later that I was accepted to Officer Candidate School that fall. They set up an enlistment for me. You have to be enlisted, so I went and did that. And then I reported to Yorktown, Virginia in mid-September of 1971. And we had a 17 or 18 week OCS program, the longest of all the services.
Wow, that's incredible.
That is long. So what was your experience in the basic training and your first days of service?
Okay, well, it was Officer Candidate School, and what they do is they were taking people like me, and we had some prior enlisted people, and they teach you about the military. They teach you everything from as basic as waxing floors, we call them decks in the Coast Guard, even if it's on land, and marching, and then all the functions of seamanship, navigation, Coast Guard history, military bearing, respect, rank, and rate structure, and everything that we know to be minimally qualified to serve as an ensign. And then we just had so much to learn after that. But you know, we at least knew how to wear a uniform and do some things that nobody was looking too closely.
So did you have two different basic training kind of from your enlistment period to OCS?
I did not. The way the Coast Guard ran it at that time, and they still do for OCS, is you go straight to Officer Candidate School from college, and they hope they can mold you properly with 17 or 18 weeks they have, so that they can turn out an ensign and not be, which is the lowest rank in the officer rank in the Coast Guard, and not be embarrassed. And they give you to somebody else and hope that you don't embarrass the people who trained you. And then somehow I got through that. And now what they do is, well, in our, backing up a little bit, we had people in our OCS program who were prior enlisted. They had spent 3 or 4 or 6 years already being out in the fleet somewhere in a variety of skills. We also had a few warrant officers who chose to go and go to OCS and become ensigns, and that would give them a greater career advancement opportunity.
Were there any like major events that you remember or people who greatly influenced your career?
Oh, well, throughout the career, certainly, but a few people in Officer Candidate School. One of my instructors became a Coast Guard Rear Admiral, and his name was Rick Snyder, and the head of Norwich University. He spent about 8 years on active duty, and then became a reservist, went on, continued, got himself a doctorate degree, and headed for over 20 years at Norwich University up in Vermont, and there actually wore the rank of an Army Major General. I believe he was actually, by taking that job, he was part of the Vermont militia, but he became he was a Coast Guard Rear Admiral in the Reserve, head of Norwich as an Army Major General or equivalent, and during the football games used to spend half his time on one side of the field, half his time on the other. he was very helpful to me personally, and OCS, and we got to work together quite a bit later on throughout my career, and we went to some of the same service schools together.
Well, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So yeah.
You said that you didn't participate in you didn't go to Vietnam when you
I did
came
not.
out before
Well,
9/11.
Well, yeah, I entered the Coast Guard, or after OCS, in January of 1972, at which point they announced shortly thereafter that the draft was going to be ending. The primary motivation I had, but I was sent to Coast Guard headquarters. I had orders to go to Hawaii, and because the Vietnam was trailing off, and they decided while I was in OCS that the ship I had actually gotten, which I thought, it's one of those dreams come true. I'm going to go to Hawaii. I'm going to travel the South Pacific for 8 months of the year and whatever. The ship was called the Kukui. And what it did is it serviced Loran A stations at the time in the islands of the Pacific. And I thought that I would go there and become a deck watch officer and perform the functions and missions of that. They decided to decommission the ship. The Loran A program was being cut back and terminated. The ship was old, and so I had to come back after that. I mean, I hadn't left yet. I hadn't graduated, and they said, we've got two choices. You can go to Governor's Island in New York, or you can go to headquarters. Both is an extra number. And at that point, with Vietnam ending, the Coast Guard and the other services had planned the size of their OCS classes far in advance of us ever showing up. And as a consequence, the Coast Guard had too many junior officers, and particularly OCS officers, the primary source of officers of the academies. And so anyway, I went to headquarters. I didn't want to go to Governor's Island, and kind of looked around and found myself a job. I was, as a reserve officer, I was assigned to the Office of Reserve, but when the draft was announced to be ending, the Coast Guard quickly realized they needed to have a recruiting program, and they had not had a recruiting program of any effort since the Korean conflict. I found a way to be in there, and I was able to, I served my 3 years, or just about 3 years, supporting the Coast Guard's recruiting program. Wonderful job for me. Junior officer, learned about marketing, was in a position or billet much higher than anyone would have been in my grade, and I was able to work with the other services and find a way through that. And then I also had the opportunity as a collateral duty. I had my regular job, but as a collateral duty, I was selected to be a White House social aide for the Coast Guard.
Oh, wow.
And was able to serve there during the Nixon and Ford administrations. And we weren't doing foreign policy or anything. We were really supporting the first family in the execution of state dinners and receptions and functions, and had to buy some extra uniforms and keep them pressed and sharp, and spend some late nights too, and still go to work in the daytime.
You said that you were part of the Gulf War.
Well, I was in the reserve during the Gulf War,
During the Gulf.
and as a reservist, let me lead up to that really, because there was so much before then. When I left active duty, which was in 1975, I went to grad school, but I also stayed in the reserve. I liked what I was doing, and I was able to, and it was a job too. I needed the money and to start with, and so most of the reservists at that time became involved in the port security function, and that was what that is simplistically is the protection of the ports, the harbors, where goods and products and containers now, but a lot of bulk material and liquid material, oil, lubricants, whatever, come into our ports, and we needed to help ensure that they were secure, so the bad guys wouldn't blow up the port. You couldn't have your materials either coming into the country or going out. And so I did that, and I also got involved in small boat operations on Chesapeake Bay. And for the most of my reserve career, I did that. I was recalled to active duty twice, and one was to just by accident. I was switching jobs, and I was doing a little bit of extra time, and I was asked to be involved in the setup of what was called their command control communications program. Just by accident, I met the fellow who was the designer of that, and the brains behind bringing three functions: electronics, telecommunications, and financial computing all together. And I did that, and did a bunch of the reserve was a godsend to me. It just gave me another edge on my life and allowed me to be outside rather than working in an office throughout my career.
What was one thing that you experienced that you never expected going into the military? And do you have any first impressions when first joining the Coast Guard?
Oh, there are just so many. I never expected to have it as a parallel career, and I never understood before I was in it the teamwork and the respect that the Coast Guardsmen and women and team has for one another. They're small. They work in much smaller teams than you see in the other services, and they also provide you with command and leadership opportunities right out of the box. I mean, stuff that I would never have expected, and I learned from that too. I learned things that helped me in my civilian careers. Different jobs I had there, just a way of doing work with people, a way of needing to manage both up and down. To be successful, you've got to be able to oversee and excite and lead people who work for you, but let them do their jobs. And then everybody has bosses, and to get your job done, you need to be able to lead your bosses too, or if you have a good idea, you've got to be able to sell them on the point you're trying to make. Otherwise, you lose so much. And if you can bring all that together and work that from the center, I think that's the way to go. And the Coast Guard taught me that.
What was one of the biggest challenges that you faced when in the Coast Guard?
Oh, there were so many. And I'll speak as a reservist. The biggest challenge I found, I think, was trying to manage my time. I was fortunate enough in my civilian job to very early on to have a number of fairly responsible jobs and time-consuming jobs that were way above my age. I also had my reserve job too, and that took a lot of time. It took you talk about a week and a month, and 2 weeks in the summer. It was far more than that. And we didn't have cell phones and electronic tools we had now, so you can kind of multitask easier. I mean, we used to write stuff down on paper and have to then get it typed, or go to the West Coast, and if you didn't catch the plane back by noontime, you took the red eye and arrived the following morning, and then trying to do that, and then being married and having a family and 3 sons, and doing all the stuff that entails, and then trying to be a good dad, a good Coast Guard officer, and a good employee and manager. look back and wonder how I got through it.
You
Yeah.
touched upon that you had jobs that were above your age. Could you expand on that? Like delve deeper into like what kind of assignments that you were tasked to do
Okay, for the Coast Guard or for my civilian
for the
jobs?
Coast Guard?
Okay, um, we never had a lot of people in the Coast Guard, and people had other jobs to do. So even as a Lieutenant JG and Lieutenant, I ended up, I might have been titled training officer or some other title, but more often than not, I was seemed to be called upon to act as the executive officer of my units, or to be the liaison to a number of units, which would have been done by what then were Coast Guard groups, are now called sectors. So there, whatever I thought my job was, it was much more.
How
Yeah.
old were you then?
Well, I was 23 years old when I came into the Coast Guard. No, that's when I first joined. So maybe when I was 30, but I was doing things, and we'd have to interact with the active duty counterparts at the time, and who ran the shop at that point on a day-to-day basis. We augmented that, but we weren't really integrated at that point. The Coast Guard Reserve was, with few exceptions, not really integrated into the active duty function. So you had two activities going. That's changed. It's something that changed for the best, because I think that it was, in my opinion, at the time, was terribly inefficient. And we now better use our resources, better apply them, and everybody knows their job.
Yeah. When did you go into the reserve, and what made you decide that you wanted to stay in the military?
Well, I went into the reserve right after I left active duty. I was in graduate school for a year then, and I did that because it paid. They pay me, and but it was just a growing evolution from a reluctant participant, as I said, to a fellow who, the Coast Guard was, so they organized me, they focused my thinking, they matured me, and they made me realize that this was really something good, and that I could, if I did my job, I could be a part and help them.
Yeah, that's very, I feel very motivated by that and inspired. And the skills that you touched upon, how the Coast Guard kind of made you who you are, do you think those skills that you learned in the service carried you into the job you pursued after the military?
Absolutely, over and over and over. Life is a set of building blocks, and you learn from what you do, you learn from the people you meet, and if you pay attention, and not everything's going to go right. I made my share of mistakes and more, and but if you learn from your mistakes, and you learn how to not make that mistake again, and you learn what led to that mistake, you can apply it in almost any function. The military and the Coast Guard is a career and a job, and it's not other than the uniform you wear and some of the functions you perform. You are using the same skill sets that you do in the civilian world. I think the pace sometimes moves a little bit faster because of the nature of the job. People's lives are sometimes at risk depending on what your function is, and their lives are the people you might, in a search and rescue effort, you might be trying to save, but just as importantly, the lives of your crew. You're responsible for your entire crew, and you're responsible for your activity, either directly or indirectly. Do it right, and that's a tremendous. It's a burden, but it's also it's a responsibility, and that grows. You grow from that.
Yeah. And how do you think your experience would have differed if you chose a different path, branch-wise? So if you did have perfect vision, or if the Navy didn't have enough people?
Oh, a lot of what ifs. You know? What if this or what if that? It worked out for me. Well, if I'd done something else, I wouldn't have met my wife, who's the best thing that ever happened to me. I mean, she has looked out for me and given me much more than I've ever given her. And I, you know, I mean, it might have been somebody else, but it's just you look forward. You don't look back. You know, what if I'd actually gotten to be on a ship that fixed Lorraine stations in the South Pacific? I don't know. I might have fallen overboard in a storm. I mean, you know, you can do what ifs forever, but it was. I mean, the Coast Guard's very precious to me, and I also met other people. You asked about mentors and people. I had another boss too who became he was a mentor before I knew what a mentor was. Looked after me. We became a lifelong friend. Sadly, passed away a year or two ago. It was Rear Admiral Ed Gilbert, and I believe you're going to be talking to Admiral Allen. Admiral Allen worked for Admiral Gilbert as well.
Oh, wow.
And if this happened, if he brings them up, and he might, Admiral Gilbert was just so valuable as a friend, a mentor, a boss, you know, a sounding board. Met him in the Coast Guard, and I'm just forever grateful.
That's incredible.
Going back to how your life was like in active service, like how busy were you and what did you do in your free time?
Well, in active service, again, I had my active service was really in three parts. It was my time as a junior officer right after OCS. Then I was recalled for what ended up being a couple of years, and actually worked for the Coast Guard for a short time as a civilian. And then I worked for another 2 years doing what was called a headquarters reorganization study. We call it the Gilbert II study. That Admiral Gilbert was tasked with helping to, or finding a way to obtain more resources out of the Coast Guard. We had restructuring. First of all, the first part was restructuring the Coast Guard districts, reducing them and providing more people into an operational role. My piece of it, which was the second phase, was to take a look at the headquarters and support functions, and we call them headquarters units as well, and to direct them so that they could provide better support to the operational side of the Coast Guard. And being part of that group was an honor and desperately needed at that time. And so that was that portion of there, and other reserve jobs I had at the time. I was involved. I was a watchstander of what's called flag plot. It's the headquarters command center. What we really are informational traffic cops, ensuring that the information from any operational case gets to the correct Coast Guard function or DoD function that it needs to get to in a timely and accurate manner. You've got a whole lot of people, you've got a big food chain of information that could get garbled or confused, and our job was to try to sort that out and expedite it so that the information was actionable and decisionable.
Did you have any free time?
Oh, and that? Oh, sometimes, yeah. I mean, it's either very quiet or very very intense. But that was one of the jobs I had. I became the reserve commanding officer of that function, and then later on, I was a reserve commanding officer at Yorktown, which is the biggest operational unit, reserve unit on the East Coast. So that kept me busy.
Going back to kind of assignments too, what do you think was the job or role that had the biggest impact on you?
That's tough because each one had its place. It's sort of like a puzzle, and each piece had its own value and purpose. But being on active duty, back as a junior officer, I was the title anyway. I was the assistant chief of enlisted recruiting for the Coast Guard. Now everybody has hierarchies, but in terms of where we would place recruiting offices, where we would, how we would staff them, how we would take whatever pool of resources or assets we had to apply. That was we had to establish a recruiter school. Our recruiters were not trained when we started that as recruiters. They nominally were, but they weren't trained as salespeople who had to go out and with no draft. The Coast Guard was fortunate enough to be able to pretty much fill its quotas because people knew if they could get the Coast Guard, they wouldn't be drafted, and they chose that sort of duty. Well, that ended when the draft ended.
Where was it located?
Well, my job was at Coast Guard headquarters, but we had recruiters all over the country, and we had districts, and they were there. So it was a nationwide effort. But we had to make sure we had the right leaders out in the field, and we had to develop them. To be a recruiter, it takes generally a different skill set than you might find in a bosun's mate or an electronics technician or somebody. You need to focus on who this candidate is, who's interested, how to encourage them to commit to the Coast Guard, how to be honest with them too. I mean, you can either be a used car salesman, or you can be a counselor and coach and someone who's going to help a junior person in a big portion of their life, and you want that to work right.
Were you able to travel to these locations, or did you just stay?
No, I traveled all around the country as a junior officer, and I was 24, 25, 26 years old.
Just seeing the world.
Yeah, well, now I've seen the States. I haven't seen much of the world, but I did that. That was important to me. And then another one was being part of the headquarters, the Gilbert II study, the reorganization study we had. And by the way, if you do talk to Admiral Allen, he and I had pretty similar jobs. He was in Gilbert I. We were both lieutenant commanders at the time. We both were working out of conference rooms with no windows in the Department of Transportation headquarters. Wow. And he was on one, so we didn't work directly together, but we worked in the same sort of function, one job after the other. So, and their product, our product, was building on their product.
And were you in during the switch from Department of Transportation to Homeland Security? No, I retired. Well, I've done a number of things. I was involved in that, but that was as a civilian in a consulting role. No, I retired in 2000, and the switch to Homeland was after 9/11. And I came into the Coast Guard after the switch from the Department of Treasury to the Department of Transportation, because Coast Guard grew up and started in 1790 with the Treasury Department, and became part of DOT, Transportation, about 1967. So, yeah. That's amazing. So rolling into our fourth segment, I've told you a few times, but a focus of my project is looking at the transition experience of a lot of veterans, because that can be really difficult on some people. So starting on that point, when did your service end?
Well, my active service, the first period of my active service ended in 1975, a long time ago. But my reserve service ended in about 2000. So it was, but I had been for the great part of my career, I've been a reservist. And so it was taking both those jobs and running them in parallel and juggling and having a civilian job, having a reserve job, and trying to be a good husband and dad. And the reason I eventually ended it was I was coming to the end of my career anyway. I was a captain. I was a senior captain. So that would have ended at 30 years. I got 28, and I just there was too much going on, and I felt that one thing you don't want to do is you don't want to put so much on your plate that you end up doing everything poorly. And I realized I was up against the stops on that one, and the more senior you get as a reservist, it's not just a weekend a month and 2 weeks in the summer. It was all the time, and so I had everything all the time, and you need to call it. And again, I did not want to fail, or even if it wasn't a failure, I didn't want to feel like I was failing in one of those.
What was your civilian job and how did you find it?
Well, I had several. I had been after grad school. I worked for what now is KPMG, but I was a consultant. We were doing weapon system acquisition support work for the Navy's Harpoon missile and the Air Force's F-16. Was doing that. Then I went back to work for the Coast Guard for a few years as a recalled for a bit, and then I worked in the Command Control and Communications program, the establishment of that. I was their financial manager. And then I went for a couple of years to the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, and I was their, we didn't call it CFO, but I was their chief of fiscal operation. I was in charge of the budget in their financial program. Then I was called to the active duty for that Gilbert study for about 2 years. Then I went over and became the budget director in the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation and the director of accounting operations, and did that, and then retired early in 2004, and then went to work in the Bush-Cheney 04 presidential campaign. Thought I was going to just teach part-time after that was over and do some consulting and whatever. And then I was called up and they asked me to come over and be the financial advisor to the head of the Federal Highway Administration. And we did that for 2 years, working in I was a political appointee in the Bush administration. And then after that worked for a variety of consulting jobs, including the National Academy of Public Administration as an independent consultant.
So he worked in Admiral Gilbert, is that the right name?
That Gilbert study back in.
Yes. Could you kind of describe what you did in that and what it consisted of?
Well, what we had to do was we had to take a look at the Coast Guard headquarters and headquarters functions and try and identify where there was duplication and excess, and try to put together an organization that could better support the active duty side of the Coast Guard. And a big piece of that was also the support functions in the field, how you maintain ships and aircraft, how you run your logistics stream, how you service and repair your ships with a shipyard up in Baltimore. We had how you acquire new hardware and software, and that's what our job was, to take a look at what we had, and it was everything we had, and say, well, how can we do all this stuff better? Because you get a lot of history and an organization, and people like what they're having, what they have, even if it's not too good. They like running it without too much change. We were change agents, and amazingly, we didn't get everything we wanted to get accomplished in that study. But then, 15 years later, there was this other lieutenant commander who I had worked with, who by that time became the commandant of the Coast Guard. His name was Van Allen, and Admiral Allen wanted to take that and do a modernization project and try to finish some of the stuff that politically we weren't able to do. I mean, some things are, for the point in time, was bridged too far. You know, you do things, but you know, you got a lot of inertia, and you got other stuff going on too. And but anyway, Admiral Allen came in and was now in charge of the show, and wanted to get some of that stuff actually done. And I was fortunate enough to be a consultant to the National Academy of Public Administration at that time, who was engaged to come in and give his work on that modernization project an independent look. And so it was helpful that I was there. I was able to use my Coast Guard experience and the relationships I had around the building with some of the people being affected, and you know, you can do things the hard way or the easier way. By talking and explaining the outcome and the benefits of it, makes it a bit easier. And I kind of fit into that mold sometimes. So that was good. That was full circle. That really completed my role with the Coast Guard.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, so what was your transition experience or process coming out of the military and into like civilian life?
It was just gradual. As a reservist, it was gradual. I wasn't starting something new. It wasn't going for me from just the Coast Guard to an entirely new career. Mine was just, you know, a little bit less here, a little bit more there, and so it was just kind of a smooth transition, and so we, you know, that was easy for me, and I was able to do that.
What influence did your military experience have on your post-service?
Oh, I just built on it. One job leads to the next, and we just build on that from jobs. Work is work, and I don't want to say that too casually, but it is. You can take what you find in the military and apply it to civilian life, and you can do vice versa. It's depends on how you look at it. I tended to look at it as you know, it was just a continuous piece of life, and it worked well for me doing it that way.
On one more note, is there any like advice you would give a younger person looking to go into the military today, or a junior officer or enlisted person?
I just recognize what the military is. I mean, it's a 24/7 job and a career. You don't always get to take vacation when you want. You don't always get to do what you want. But the opportunities being afforded to you are just huge. if you use them. And some things you won't like, a lot of things you will, and it will change. And I think it's a tremendous opportunity if someone's interested in doing that. There's a lot involved though. People depend on you, and it's not a place to go, and it's not a 9-to-5 job. It is, but it is immersion into work, and then you're supporting the United States, and that's critically important these days. And so many people don't have that. Sadly, don't have, in my opinion, a solid national respect and value set that they need to have. I'm a great believer in national service, and it doesn't have to be the military, but I like the way the Israelis do it. Everybody contributes to their country for a couple of years, and everybody. And no exceptions. And I think you have some skin in the game there, and that's so valuable and so missing in today's society. So I can commend anybody who's looking to do that and encourage them to do that, but to do it with their eyes open.
Thank you for that. That's all the questions we have. Is there anything you'd like to add on?
I wish you the best with this project. You got to me right in the beginning of your search to do something, and I think it's so valuable for our American Legion post to have had the honor of working with you to do that. I think that this is a thing that the American Legion and other organizations ought to do. This should be a part of our job, and I'm glad you came to us.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your service.
Thank you. My service was, I was very blessed in what I was able to do, and people who are in the service today have it far tougher than I had it, and I commend them, and just always worried about their safety and health. And,
you helped pave the way for their in there though.
I think
Everybody fills that role, and brings that in together.
thank you. A lot of people there. But everybody has a little piece of it, and it's our obligation to do it properly.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.